All right, welcome back to the modular inventory tutorial series, part 3. So let's see what I'm going to add this time. I'm going to add the equipment item with their stats. There's going to be a base stat on each of them. There can be multiple, and yeah, you can equip them, of course. I'm also going to work on the item stacks. Those wood items have a stack size of 10. I think the brick 2 and the gold coin have a stack size of 3 only. The stack size is configurable. You decide how many items can be stacked. And if you hold shift and right click, you can split the stacks. You can choose the amount that you want to split and split. So that's pretty cool. And the last thing is the hotbar. You could put items in your hotbar at the bottom, anything. But for now, it's only going to be a basic hotbar. There's not going to be that much functionality to it. Probably in the next part, where I show the usable item, then it could be interesting to have them at the bottom, and you could use them by pressing the key. So let's start with the item itself. So in the item GD script, we're going to add a bunch more information here. So those variables will not be export anymore because I'm going to change the way I'm loading the item in the game so it's more easy to iterate over the item. So if you want to change some data quickly, I'm going to show you that soon. Stack size. Let's set it to 1 by default. The default for equipment type, so game enums, equipment type will be none. Then we will add the quantity. And by default, it's going to be 1. So let's say you have a sword or an armor and it's not stackable, then by default, it's going to be only 1. So you can't stack it. Then I'm going to add the level of the item, but this is going to be used mostly in the next part when I add the rarity and item level. And the last thing is going to be the components. So var components, and this is going to be a dictionary. This is where all the components of the item are going to be stored. So base stat is going to be a component because let's say a stone brick doesn't have base stats. And in the next tutorial, this is going to be used a lot more. So like if you have a usable item or something that has different functionality added to it, then that would go in there. So now that we have all the data we need, I'm going to change the ready function for a init. So this is going to be useful to create item easily. I'm going to get the item ID and some data. So just to explain a bit what I'm going to do, I could start by showing you the new data format I'm going to use. So if I go in my item folder and my data folder, this is the item I have right now. But this is kind of tedious because every time you want to add an item, you have to come here and set the data in the editor. And let's say you add a new field to it. So right now I added stack size. You would need to come here, set the stack size of this item, set the stack size of those. So every time you add a new property, you have to do that. The way I'm doing it, instead, I'm loading the data for the item from a JSON file. So what I do is right click and open in File Manager. So then I see the content of the file and then I can create my JSON file. So create new file. I'm going to call that items.json. Since I'm here, I can also create stats.json because I'm going to also store the stats in here. And I'm going to use Visual Studio Code to edit the file. The structure looks like a dictionary in Godot, so it's pretty simple to understand. And then you have your key. So this would be the item ID. And then the item itself has some data in it. So here you would put like your name of the item name. Then you could do the other property of your item, stack size. Let's say this one is 1. You could have anything here. So yeah, I'm not going to create all items here. I'm going to show you what I have instead. So if I bring the data I already have, so let's say the gold coin, I have the name, the stack size, the level of the item. Yeah, then I have the crystal with a different stack size, the wood, stone brick. And then I have the equipment. So those have the type. So if the item doesn't have a type, well, it's none. And those one, helmet has a base stat. And the base stat is an array, so you can have multiple. So this one has defense, and the range is from 2 to 3. Yeah, when you loot it, you'll have a scale, and we'll apply it to the range to get the value that item will have. The chest plate, wooden sword, which add damage. And the last one is the magic orb, and this one has 2. So we have the first stat range, and the second one following. This is in the base stat property. Now, for the stats themselves, it's pretty similar. So I've prepared a small list of stats. So here, what I'm doing is, again, the dictionary, the key, vitality. The name is what I want to display in game, if I want to see that stat. And the display is when I'm showing it in the list, in the item info. So if you would have vitality on an item, and you would have +5, so it would say +5 to vitality. And I have the basic stats: vitality, strength, intelligence, dexterity. This you can change everything. In the next part, I'm gonna show how to make it so some stats affect the others. So vitality should add life point too, but yeah, I'm gonna show that later when I'm gonna implement a bit more of the stats. For now, it should be enough. So let's save this one too, and let's go back to the game. So now that we're in Godot, in the file, you can't see the JSON file, but they are here in this data folder. Now let's go in the game enums script. I have equipment type, and I'm gonna add the stats. So the stats, vitality, strength, intelligence, and everything like that. So that's a small list I have just as an example. So now if we go in the item manager, so we were preloading the TSCN directly. We're gonna delete those. So now my item is empty. So now I'm gonna need the path for the JSON file. So I'm gonna do item path is equal to, what I can do is bring one of my old item and simply change the name here, items.json. That's the path for the file. And now I need to load it. So here I'm gonna load everything on ready function. I need a file. File is equal file new. We need to open the file. File open. We give it the item path. We open that and we open it as read. So now the items variable is simply going to be equal to, we're going to parse the content of the file into a dictionary. So file.get as text. The last thing is to close the file. File.close. So when we get the item, what we're going to do instead is we're going to remove that, ask the item script itself new. So when we call new, it's going to call the init function, the one that we just made. We're going to pass in the ID of the item. We're going to get the items, and we're going to get the one with this ID. This means that if we go in our data, so let's say we ask for the ID crystal. Then in Godot, we have a dictionary. We simply ask the items with the ID crystal, and we'll send this data. All right, so let's save that. Now let's go back in the item. When we initialize the item, we get the ID and the data. All we have to do is place the data. So ID is equal item ID, item name is equal data.name. So that's the dictionary from the file. We can simply call it with the dot. Then level is going to be equal to data.level. But now here we need to set the texture of the texture rect, the icon of the item. So I'm going to have to bring in more sprites. Let's go in my sprite folder. I've imported my new items. I'm going to make sure they are 2D pixel again, re-import. I'm going to change some names so they fit the ID of the item. So here, the texture is going to be equal to, what I could do is load, bring something in, change this to have the ID in here. But what I like to have is a resource manager so I can ask to give me the resource I need. So let's go in managers and create new script, resource manager, no comment, node, that's pretty good. Create that. Let's open it. So let's create the class name, resource manager. So in here, I'm going to have the stats. So stat path, which is going to be stats, so stats.json. In here, I'm going to have also the sprites. So all the icons for the items. So var sprites is going to be equal to a dictionary. Sprite, I'm going to set the name. So let's say chest plate. Then this is going to be equal to preload. And in here, I simply put the file, sprites, chest plate. So then if I need a sprite, I can simply call resource manager. I need to put it as a auto load script again. So project settings, auto load, select it, managers, resource manager, node name, yes, add. And now it's in the list, so close. So I'm going to be able to call this script and ask for the sprite. Let me add the other one. Okay, so that should be all the items. Let's save the script. Let's go back in items. Now here I can simply do resource manager dot sprites, and I can get the index of the ID. That should be it for the texture. Now let's start to look at the optional data, because if we go back in my item file, those items all have a stack size, but the equipment doesn't have the stack size property. We have to check if it has it and then set it. So we will have to check if it has it to do so. So if the data has the property stack size, then we'll set it. Stack size will be equal to data.stackSize. And just to make sure, let's say that the stack size is an int. Then after the stack size, we're going to do the type. So let's copy this one and put it there. So if the data has a type, let's say it's a sword, then it's going to have a type because by default it's none. So here, equipment type will be equal to, now we'll go in the enum, so game enums equipment type, and we'll get the equipment type data.type there. For the last one, it's the base stat. So if I add this here, if the data has base stats, then here we'll need some new resource to deal with that, because this is going to be a component. So we'll have to create a new component, base stat, then insert it in this variable. I'm going to go in my items folder. I'm going to create a new script, base stat, create that. All right, open it. It's going to extend from resource, and I'm going to give it a class name, base stat. So what is a base stat? It's basically a array of stat range. Let's see in the data. If I look at the magic orb, a base stat is an array of stat range. I'm going to need an array, and I'm going to need a scale to know which value I'm going to get. So let's do that. Var stat ranges, var scale. And this one will be a float. It's going to be a value between 0 and 1. So let's say when you loot an item, if you're lucky and you get like 0.9, then you're going to have a high stat. So with those two values, I'm going to have the init function. And this one will get the data for this base stat itself. And it's going to get the value, which will be the scale. So let's set that. Scale is equal to value. So for each stat range in data, since this is going to be an array, we're going to get the dictionary itself. So what I'm going to do here is add a new stat range to the stat ranges. Let's create the stat range resource. So here again, new script. So stat range and create. Open it. So class name, stat range, extend resource. This one is going to be pretty simple. We need the stat, we need the minimum value, and we need the maximum value. Now, again, this one will have a init function. This one will only get its data. So this data correspond to these curly braces. So this will be one stat range. So stat value, intelligence, minimum, maximum. So in here, we can simply do stat is equal to gameenums.stat, and we'll get the data.stat. Minimum is equal to data.minimum. Let's do the same for max. So maximum. I can add already the function to get the value. Since we're here, function get value. So let's say we want to get the value of this stat range from a scale. So we'll pass in the scale and what stat we're looking for. So needed stat, because maybe we want to, we have the whole inventory. We want to go through each item and get the total of one stat in particular. Then we will search for a stat. So if stat is equal to needed stat, then we will return a value between minimum and maximum based on the scale. And to do so, it's pretty easy. You simply use the function lerp. It's from, to, and the weight. So pretty easy. Minimum, maximum, scale. Now the thing is, we'd like to round the value so we don't get 0.53 defense. So round. If it's not, then we can return 0. If you want to do the if in one line, then you can simply return this if this condition is true, else 0. So you could have that instead. So it's shorter code, but it's more readable like that. So it depends on your taste, on your code taste, how you like your spaghetti. All right, let's continue. So if we go back in the base stat now, we can add it. So stat ranges dot append add. So we'll add a stat range dot new, and now when we pass something in the new, it's gonna send it in the init. And we simply have to send stat range, because this is going to be the dictionary from the array in our file. All right, save that. Let's go back to the item now. Now we can instantiate the base stat. So let me make some place here. All right, components. We'll add the component base stat is going to be equal to base stat.new. So a new base stat, and we'll pass in the data.base stat. So the scale we can simply do rand f. So a random float, and this will always return between 0 and 1. That's it for the creation of the item. Now we'll see for the quantity. Yeah, let's go on one of those items I have here. If I want to display the quantity of the item, could go here, item, add a child node. I'll add a label. Let's say 42. That's a bit big. I'll go in my font folder. Let's create a custom font. Here, a new dynamic font. So in font here, open that. font data. So setting, let's say 8 is correct, and maybe change the color. So custom color, let's put it black. That seems all right. Okay, so that seems pretty simple. But the way I create my item, it's in the init function, so I can't really play with the tree. So yeah, this seems good, but instead of saving this label as a resource and loading it and editing the value in it, what I'm going to simply do is create it directly in the code. So function ready, when the item will be ready, it's going to create its own label. I'm going to add var label quantity, then in ready, label quantity is going to be equal to a new label.new, a label quantity. Now I need to set the font. So what I could do is save it as a resource. If I go back in my scene, let's Control Z, my dynamic font here, let's save. Let's put it in font, call it font 8, save that. All right. And if I go in my script, so label quantity, I will set the custom font. So dot set. To know what property you want to set, you can mouse over it in the inspector. So here it's property custom fonts / font. Property custom font. Now, I think I'm going to put the font in my resource manager. If I need it anywhere else, I could simply use it from here. Var fonts. I'm simply going to call it by the size of the font. So 8 is going to be preload. And this font 8. All right, save that. Go back here. Resource manager dot fonts 8. Then we need to set another custom property. It's going to be the custom color, font color. So it's custom color / font color. All right. Copy this one and just set this value, custom colors, and here it's pretty simple, color.black there. All right, now we're gonna add it. Add child label quantity. Okay, so that's pretty good. We need to set the quantity in the label itself, and the way I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna create a function, set quantity. I'm gonna receive a value, and I'm gonna use this also as a setter. So if I go back up for my quantity, I'm going to have a set get, and I'm only going to set the setter set quantity. If I set the quantity elsewhere in the game, it's going to call the set quantity and it's going to update my label. That's what I want. And after the item is ready, I'm going to call this set quantity with its own quantity. So let's say your item already have 5 quantity when it has been created. Then when it's going to be ready, it's going to show it correctly. So set quantity. When you have a setter, you need to set the base value. So quantity is equal to value. This set quantity can be called even before the item is ready in the tree here. So if it is, the label quantity will not be created. We need to look if label quantity exists. Label quantity text is equal to string quantity. If it's a sword or an equipment or something that is not stackable, then we will not show it. So quantity.visible, it's only going to be visible if quantity is greater than 1. All right, save that. Now, since I changed my ID of the item, if I go back in my main scene and I look at my buttons I have there, they have the array of items, and the ID here are not good anymore. So this one will be gold coin. This one is crystal, that's correct. This one has gold coin. Brick, tree is going to be wood, and crystal. To be able to stack the item, we need to go in the inventory manager in the function on GUI input slot. When we click a slot, we check if we have something in our hands and if there's already something in the slot. Now here we need to add something if the slot.item.id, so if the ID of the item is the same as the item in hand.id, but then we need to know if the quantity is lower than the max stack size. Stack size. So then we would stack it, or else we do what we were doing before. Yeah, so for that, I'm gonna call a function on the item, because if you have a stack in your hand and try to place it on the item, there might be a reminder. Let's say you have a max stack of 10, your stack is 9, you pick 2 items and try to place it on top, you will have a reminder of 1, so you want to keep that item in your hand. So I'm gonna pass here for now, go back in the item and add this function to return the remainder. Back in the item, add function, add item quantity. We're gonna pass the value. So first, let's get the remainder. So our remainder is gonna be equal to quantity plus value minus the stack size. If it's negative, it means that there's no remainder. Now the new quantity is gonna be equal to the minimum between the new quantity and the max stack, the stack size. So it's going to be the minimum between quantity plus value or stack size. So let's say your quantity is 9, you add 3 to it, your quantity will be 12, but the stack size is 10. So the minimum value will be the stack size, 10. Then we set quantity and return the remainder. Save that. Let's go back to the inventory manager. Here we can simply say the remainder is going to be equal to slot. The item that is already in the slot will add item quantity. The quantity will be the item in hand dot quantity. Then we'll get the remainder. So what can happen with this remainder? So there's two things. If the remainder is less than 1, so item in hand is equal to null. There's nothing left. Else, since here we always remove the item in hand beforehand, then we'll replace it inside item in hand node dot add child item in hand, and then item in hand dot quantity is equal to the remainder. That's it. So let's see if we can see the quantity. Let's open a chest. Let's open another one. Okay, this one, we got some trees, some wood. So we can stack those. We can stack these. Crystal. Yep, that's working. All right, now let's work on the item info. So this is the item info we have right now. Let's see what I would like to have. Here I would need a new child node, a VBox container for a list of information. This is the tedious part where you place all the nodes. So let's do it quickly. Full rec, let's place this full rec, scale it down a bit so it fits inside, and let's add a label inside. I'm going to rename this for line container. I'm going to add a child label. This one, so let's say it's an armor. I'd like to have this a bit smaller. Let's go in the custom font folder, custom font. Let's create a new dynamic font. There, all right. I'm going to make it so it's centered. So align, center 2. Let's change the size. So let's go with 8. Yeah, let's see for the color. Pick like the brown that is around. Make it a bit darker. There, that's pretty nice. Now I would like to have a splitter between the type of the item and the stat. So let's add a child node. I'm going to create a texture rect. And inside here, I already have in my inventory sprites a bar. So let's put that in here. Let's make it keep centered. Yes, a splitter bar right there. Let's duplicate the label and put it underneath. Scale this up, right? And this one could be +5 defense. All right, that's pretty good. So that's kind of the thing I'm looking for. But the thing is, if let's say your stat here is regeneration, regenerate 42 life point per second. So that's way too big, and the item info doesn't scale. And I'm also gonna change the title. So instead of being in the center there, it's gonna scale with the width. Anchor only, top wide. I'm gonna alt and scale it while holding alt. Scale it like so. Now if I scale my item info, the title will follow. All right, so let's see how I'm gonna do that. First, I'm gonna save 1 copy of the line and 1 copy of the splitter. So let's call that splitter. Save branch as seen. So I'm gonna save that in UI. Splitter tscn. Perfect. The label. This is gonna be a item stat line, and I click save branch as seen. Item stat line. So I can remove those and put that back small line. Now let's go in the script and code that stuff. So item info. Could add a class name for this. Item info. I'm gonna have to get a reference to the line container. So let's copy that. Line container as a control. I'd like to have the name of the type of items. So I'm gonna create a variable type names, and in here I'm gonna place the type. Okay, so like that. If it's none, I'm gonna call this a material for now. The display will become a bit bigger now. Every time we'll display this, we'll display all the lines in the line container. We'll have to remove them every time we show it too. So for each child in line container, get children, line container, remove the child, then Q3. We'll remove it so later when we try to calculate the height, the item info, it's not still in the list. The rect size.x, so the width of the item info needs to be reset every time. So if the last item was large, the next item is not too large. So here I'd like to have the line with the type of the item. So what I'll do is create a new variable. Line type is going to be equal to, here I'm going to have to create a script for the item line and call the new function, so the init. Let's first do that. And now that I think about it, if I go back in my UI, the item stat line, I don't have to save it as a scene. I can only save it like I did with the item stack label. So I'm going to remove this one, but I'm going to keep the color. So custom color, let's click on it. I'm going to keep this value here. I'm going to bring it in my resource manager. I'm going to add a color variable. This is going to be the normal color. So like the normal items. So later in other parts, the next parts, I might add the rarity color. So the line of the rarity could change. So this is going to be color string. So there, that's my first color. Save that. So the item stat line, I could put it here. Let's create a new script and call it item stat line. Create. I can delete the tscn. Let's close it and delete it. Move to trash. Open my script. And in here, it's going to extend label, class name, item, info, line. So this will only have an init function. And I'm going to get the value to display and the color. It's going to be pretty simple. Text is equal to value. Align is going to be equal to align center. V-align is going to be equal to center again. Then we'll set the custom property. So those are from the item. The font, I'm going to use the same since it was the number 8. And the color now here, I'm going to use the resource manager .colors and pass in the color. Save that. Let's go back. Item info. So now line type is equal to item info line .new, and I pass in the value I want to display. So the type name with the item, slot.item, that equipment type. So it's going to give me the name itself. Then I give it the color, which is going to be normal. Then add child, line container, add child, line type. All right. So then we'll have to look at the components. For now, the only components we have is the base stat. So let's put the components in the variable. So the components is equal to slot.items.components. And if it has the base stat component, then we'll display the line. I'd like to have the splitter. Now, again, I could do the same as I do with the item info line, create a texture rect, set value. But here I'm just going to load the splitter scene that I saved. But instead of loading it here, I'm going to put it in my resource manager. So I'm going to have another variable, cn. It's going to be a bunch of pack scene that I can quickly instantiate. So this one, I'm going to call it splitter, and it's going to be preload the splitter tscn. So then I can come back here, save that. The first thing is line container, add child, and here I'll add resource manager .tscn, and I'm going to get the splitter, and I'm going to instantiate it. Instance. I will need all the lines from the base stat. Base stat lines is going to be equal to components.base stat. In the base stat script, I'm going to create a function get lines that will return to me all the lines I should display. So let's create this function in base stat. So base stat function get lines. Let's start with an empty array. We'll do for stat range in stat ranges. The info of the stat info is going to be equal to something we haven't loaded yet. This is going to be the stats. So if I go back in my JSON file, for the stats, this is what I want to display. So the +2 vitality and stuff like that. So to get that, I need to load the file. So let's go in my resource manager. So I already have the stat path. Now let's go in ready. Let's make some plays. So it's going to be the same as the item manager. Let's bring the same file loading. Here I'm going to change the item for stat path. This is going to be var data, and then I'm going to close, but then I need to get the data from here. Let's create a dictionary, var stat info. I will do for each stat in the data. I want the enum to be the key. So yeah, I want the stat info with the key game enums. Stats, take the stat. So that's going to be the key. Then this is going to be equal to data stat. All right, so that's it. My stats will be ready in there, and that's going to be the dictionary inside the JSON file. So instead of being a string, it's going to be the enum and the dictionary here. So name and display. All right, save that. Let's go back in base stat. So stat info is going to be equal to resource manager stat info, and let's get the stat range stat. Whew. All right, the value. So here we already have the get value function. So stat range get value. This one takes the scale and the stat that we're looking for. So scale from the base stat itself, and the stat that we're looking for is for now its own stat. So stat range dot stat. This is mostly going to be useful when we do the stat window, so we can loop through everything. Then we set the text that we will display. It's going to be stat info. So in the stat information, we need the display one. So that, and then we'll be replacing this character to the number string, then the value that we got. So yeah, add it to the lines. Lines dot happen. Then here, what we're gonna add is a new item info line. Item info line dot new. So here we can simply pass in the text and the color. Text is text, and the color will be normal since it's the base stat. Return lines. All right, this one is done. Let's go back to item info. So now when we call get lines, we will get those. And then let's make some place again for each line. For line in base stat lines, line container dot add child line. There. Here I forgot that those type are not correct. This is offhand and this is main hand. And also I need to set my line container on my item info. Line container assign. Let's add some equipment. So let's go to main, check my main chest here. Size 5, I could increase the size. Let's do 9. And let's add other things. Let's add 4 items. So I'll have a magic orb, iron sword, chestplate, and a helmet. Let's see what it looks like. If I starting the game, let's go into chest. So we have the iron sword, weapon, plus 5 damage. But the problem is, yeah, the scale is not working. So let's work on the scale. So in item info, let's go back at the bottom here. So we'll need 2 variable, var max width. Let's start it at 0, and we'll need the height, which is going to start at 0, 2. Then for each children in a line container, get children, we'll increase the height. So height plus equal the height of the line. So the rect size of the children dot y, and we'll add 3. This is mostly for the line container custom constant here separation. You can do like in the other tutorial. You can get it, or you can just leave it there. That's up to your taste of code. And then if we need to get the line that is the most wide, so if see the children rect size dot x, if the width is greater than the max width, then we'll set it. Max width is going to be equal to this. And then at the end, we'll set the size of the item info. Rect size is equal to a new vector 2 with the max width. Now this we need to add a bit of padding because it's only the width of the line. Then we need to add some padding for the side of the panel. By playing around, I found that 30 is pretty good. And let's set the height after that. And the height is the same. I'm going to add... To find those values, I mostly trial and error, playing the game and finding out the best one. There's one thing. The rect size will not be set in the same frame that they are set in the add child. So to kind of go around that issue, what I like to do is yield. I'm going to wait 1 frame. So get tree. So if you yield, you get the tree and on idle frame. So that's basically going to wait one frame. All right, so let's test the game to see if the scaling works. All right, open the chest. Iron sword, weapon, plus 5 damage. Magic orb, offhand. Yeah, works pretty well. And those coin, crystal are material. They don't have stats, but you can stack them. All right, so that's perfect. Now, I'd like to show 2 more small things. The ability to split your stacks, and I'll start the hotbar after that. So let's go with the split. Okay, so I'll start a new user interface, and I'm gonna change this control, change type. I'm gonna put a color rect that. So it's gonna be full screen. I'm gonna change the color to dark and make it transparent because I don't want the player be able to click on other part of the game while the split window is up. I can call that split stack. I'm gonna start from the setting window. So merge from scene, UI settings, and import settings. Let's delete what I don't need. I will need only the scale. Put that out of there. Delete setting list. The label is going to be split settings panel. I'm going to scale it down. All right. So this is going to be main panel. All right. This I'm going to remove the script. Then let's add a button. Add child node button. Set it at split. All right. Let's give it some font. Here, new dynamic font, open that font, folder, Let's make it 12. Okay, that's pretty good. Layout, bottom center, like this. Then you could change the color or stuff like that. Then this slider, I'm gonna call it quantity slider. Then I will need two labels. So the original quantity scale, this one. So this is gonna be the basic label. I can leave it like that. I'm gonna scale it down, quantity, then duplicate that and move it to the side. Let's say that this is gonna be 10 smaller and align left. Yes, so this is gonna be the original quantity. Let's duplicate that one and move it to the other side. About same place, align right. And this is gonna be new quantity. Okay, so I think I have everything. Let's go and create a script. Split stack, create a script, split stack. I'm gonna put it underscore. I'm gonna put that in the UI folder and create. I'm going to extend scale control. So if you scale your UI, this one will scale too, just to make sure. If I go back in the here, select it, layout, I'm gonna put center. So if you scale it, it will scale from the center. Let's save it, inventory, split stack. So for the script, I could create a class name. Let's get the node I need. Since I already did it a lot of time, place those here. Quantity slider, label original, label new. Let's set those right now so I don't forget. Quantity slider, slider quantity, label original, and label new. Okay, then I'll need three variable. I'll need quantity, I'll need the new quantity, and the inventory slot that I'm gonna split from. And then I'll have a function display. When I want to split something, I will have to display this one. I'm gonna get as a argument the slot. So here, the quantity will be equal to the slot.item.quantity. The inventory slot will be equal to the slot. Now, the quantity slider, the max value is going to be equal to the quantity minus 1, because you don't want to be left with 0, or else you're going to have an item that has 0 quantity, and that's not working. Quantity slider, the minimum value is going to be equal to simply 1, and we'll have to make sure that you can split an item that only has 1. One other thing is the quantity slider.step. This should be 1. You don't want to split an item in half. I don't think so, unless you have that functionality in your game. And then quantity slider, the value. We'll start the value at half the quantity. So let's do quantity divided by 2, but then we need to round that. Then let's change that to an integer. All right, we'll have to set the label original and new quantity, but I'm going to create a function for that. Set labels will show the split stack window. Function set labels. So the label original text is going to be equal to the string of the quantity slider dot value. The new quantity, I'm going to set the value of that to be equal to quantity minus quantity slider dot value. And finally, the label new text will be equal to the string of new quantity. That's pretty much it. So now we need 3 signal. First, it's going to be the close. So if we click on the close button, we need to remove the old one. So pressed, connect, unclose pressed. When we close, we hide, and we don't get anything from it. Next is going to be the slider. So let's say you change the slider. I'm going to remove this function here, this signal there, and value change, connect. So on quantity slider value change. This one, I'm simply going to call set labels there. And I need one last. Let's save that. If you press split, let's rename that for btn split. Let's say you click split, pressed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to emit a signal. So emit signal stack split. Stack splitted, if that's possible. And we'll send the inventory slot, which has been splitted from, and the new quantity. And then we'll hide. Let's create this signal here at the top. Save that, and we're done with the split stack. Let's implement it in game. So let's go to the main scene there. Let's search for it. Split stack tscn. Bring that in. I'm going to put it at the bottom here over everything. So even over the buttons, let's hide it so it's always there. And now the inventory manager, we're going to go inside of it. And at the top, we'll have to add a reference to it. So add a new thing, split stack as split stack. There you go. Let's click on it, inspector, so I can assign my split stack, and it's there. Now I have access to it from here. And now let's connect the signal, split stack, connect the signal stack splitted on the inventory manager, and I'm going to call the function onStack splitted. Let's add that function onStack splitted. I'm going to receive the slot that has been splitted from and the new quantity. The slot itself, .item.quantity, is going to be minus equal the new quantity. We'll remove what we splitted, then we'll create a new item. So for that, we'll call item manager and we'll get item. So we'll get a new item, and it's going to be slot dot item ID. We don't want to copy the item because it might have some other data on it. So we'll get a new item from the ID. The new item quantity is going to be equal to the new quantity. Then item in hand is equal to the new item. So the new stack that we split it is in our hand. We'll add it to the item in hand node, add child, item in hand. There you go. Now the only thing left to do is to show the window, the UI. So here when we click on the slot, we need to add a new thing. We want to show the split window if we shift right click on the slot, but there's some other conditions too. So if the slot that we're clicking on has an item, the item quantity is over 1, the item in hand is null because we don't want to split something if we already have something in our hand. The event is button press, so this is the same, and event pressed, and button index, button left, it's going to be right, button right. That's going to be a long line, and also we need to check if the input is key pressed. It's going to be key shift. There, that's all, simply that. And this one will become the else if. We call split stack dot display, and we'll give it the slot there. All right, so let's test that. So let's open those chests. Let's stack some items. And now if I shift right click, I have my split quantity. I cannot click on anything else and split. So I have my 2, 2, and I can split 1, 1. This I cannot really choose. For this, I guess we could automatically split if you do that without asking, but that's pretty much it. I could add that later. So there you go for the splitting of the items. Now I'm gonna do a quick hotbar, but it's not gonna be complete. So to do it, let's just create a new scene, empty. I'm gonna merge from scene. I'm gonna get the inventory component. I'm gonna remove title and everything. Slot container will stay. I can make this the parent, make scene root, delete this control. This one will be anchored to the bottom. So anchor center bottom, zoom in. Yeah, I can scale it down if I change the rect size. And let's add, let's say I want to add some slot, inventory slot, just to see what it looks like. Okay, so I can move this up. All right, let's duplicate. So let's say, yeah, I can add 5 slot in there. Pretty good. Let's delete those back again. Now I'm gonna create a hotbar slot so you can see the number on it or the key that you have to press. To do so, I'm gonna click my inventory slot, right click, and new inherited scene. That's what I have. Here, I'm gonna add a child node, a label, set the font and everything. So the font, let's make it center. Let's layout bottom wide, and let's move it down a bit. So something like that. Make sure it's centered like this. Okay, that's perfect. This will be the label key. Then this is not going to be inventory slot. It's going to be hotbar slot. I'm going to remove the script and create a new one. Bar slot, pretty good. It's going to be in UI. Class name, hotbar slot. We'll need reference to the key label, like that. Save that hotbar slot before, yeah, inventory, hotbar slot. Save. Then click on the node and assign label key. All right. So we'll need the key itself, var key. And in the ready function, I'm going to do label key is equal to key. And I'm going to have a function input if event is action pressed. I'm going to create some function. So hotbar plus key. So if I pressed it, I'm just going to print, use the hotbar slot and the key. But for that, I need to go in my project settings, input map, and I need to add those in here. So action hotbar underscore. So let's say I'm just going to simply use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1. All right. And then for those, I need to click the plus to add the key 1. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Close that. So that should work. As long as I only have 5, 1. This will extend the inventory slot. So it has the same functionality. You can place item inside, save it, and let's go back to the hotbar. So this hotbar here, I'm going to have to create a script too. Let's save this. This will go in the UI hotbar. Yes, save that. Now the script, I'm going to remove the script again and add a new script, UI hotbar. It's going to, let's create it. It's going to extend scale control. So you can scale your hotbar. Class name, hotbar. So I'm going to get the slot container. I could export a size. So if I want to set the size of the hotbar, you could have your hotbar increase in size with your game. I'm going to have a var slots array. This is going to be the same as the inventory. I'm not inheriting from inventory, but it will work as an inventory. So on ready, I'll set all the slots. So for s in size, var slot is equal to. For my slot, I could go in resource manager. In my TSCN, I could add a hotbar slot and preload it. And let's get it. Hotbar slot TSCN, put it there. All right, save that, go back. So resource manager dot tscn dot hotbar slot dot instance. Then let's set the slot key to be equal to the string. It's going to be the index that we're in right now. So it's going to be s, but s starts at 0, so +1. Slot container, add child. And let's add it to the slot array 2, append. And the last thing we need to do is simply call the signal manager and say that this inventory is ready. It's not really an inventory, but it works like one. So signal manager, emit signal, inventory ready on cell. So it's going to send itself. Save that, because if we go in the inventory manager, this one will listen to inventory ready, and it's going to call on inventory ready. It's going to execute on inventory ready, and this will only look at the variable slots. Set the function so you can click on it and put item inside. Let's put the hotbar in the main scene. To the hotbar tscn, and let's put it in just over here. All right. In the tree, let's assign the slot container, and if we go in here, I can change the name for hotbar, and I can also assign the slot container like that. Save this. Okay, so yeah, in the main scene, I can rename it here too, hotbar. We need to set the size, so let's go with 5. In hotbar slot, this needs to be .text. And then there's also the hotbar slot. It's inheriting from the inventory slot, but we need to assign the item container again. Hotbar should be under the windows, so the item in hand and item info are over it. Let's start that. All right, so we can pick the item, we can put them in the hotbar. Right now there's no functionality, but later when I add the usable item, you could press the key on your keyboard to use the item. Because if we look, if I press a key here, you can see use the hotbar, and it says which one. So that was longer than I thought. I hope it was not too long for you. Yeah. If you think I could add more functionality, let me know. The next part will be the rarity of the item, and I'll look into the usable item and maybe more. All right, so thanks for watching. If you're interested in those kind of things, when I plan the tutorial, I mostly do it on stream. So if you want to look at the building and thinking process, you can come and watch me on stream on Twitch. I'll leave a link in the description below. But it's a bit longer because I'm struggling to find how to do it, the real process of game dev. That's it. With that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, I guess. I guess the add item quantity will be on the item itself. So I can remove everything I added here and go on the item. Ow, kitty. Oh, bye. Ow! My toes. That's not good.